Good morning, everyone. My name is Zach Shapiro. I'm the Temple Akiba of Culver City. You're welcome to join us for the High Holy Days. But that's another. I learned a new term for me while preparing for this session, and it's called a gibbon. And I kind of scratched my eyebrow as I looked at what this meant, and it has to do with someone with a high priest who has a reason not to be able to bring his korban as a sacrifice to the Holy Temple. And what is a gibbon? It's someone who only has one eyebrow. And I scratched my one eyebrow as I read about that. And I read further in the Mishnah about other kinds of things that prohibited a priest from being able to bring his sacrifice. And it really got me to thinking. The Talmud and the Mishnah really go deep as to who may not approach. And if we think about it, each and every one of us will fall into these categories. We all have some sort of imperfection, if I can use that word, which might, in a rabbinic sense, prohibit us from coming forward. Our session is going to look at some of these Mishnaic prohibitions, but then get to the real question. If we dig really deeply, what inside of us is broken that often makes it difficult to be there as a rabbi or as a presence for our community? And I then want to brainstorm what in Judaism is brokenness a theme that allows us to be free? And if we really dig and look at all of the different areas in Judaism where brokenness is part of our ritual, how does that open the door to allowing us to move forward? So I want to have a real discussion, a little bit of study, but then some introspection. How do we as holy vessels, holy with an WH and holy with just an H, how do we as vessels with holes enable ourselves and others to move forward? I want us to actually introduce ourselves. Just go around, tell us who you are, and what it was that inspired you or that made you feel like this was the topic that you wanted to come to. So.
I'm Sandy Rosenstein. I'm the rabbi at Temple Beth Shalom in Temecula. Hi. So now you can see what I look like. Temecula is really far away. What else can I tell you? I went to AJR, and I wanted to do this because I think a lot of my congregants feel very imperfect, and I wanted to have some more ideas of what to say about imperfection, even if it's just my own. Everybody knows my imperfections. Not everybody in the congregation is so willing to talk about or feel their own. So that's what brought me here. It's not that profound, but it is why I'm here.
I'm Doug Cohen. I'm the interim rabbi this year in San Pedro, and I was talking to Steve on because commonly in these years, for years in the Inland Empire, but I'm commonly dealing with synagogues that have some kind of breach, and sometimes known and sometimes unknown. And I'm also very keenly aware of my own life, of the imperfections that I do.
You know, Chuck Briskin and I, for years and years, were chavruta, and so I'm feeling of the profound loss of your predecessor, but also welcome. Thank you.
I'm Rabbi Miriam Hammerl, Ahavat Torah congregation in Brentwood, and I had a particular congregant who was born with a limp, a severe hearing loss, and every time we came to the Torah portion where the Kohanim, the imperfect Kohanim, cannot do the offerings, she struggled with it, and so did I. So the answers I had for her, she accepted, because I went according to what our Maimonides and Rashi and all of them said. But in my heart, I want to know a little bit more.
Thanks, man.
I'm Ira Rosenfeld, the co-founder with my wife, Cantor Beth, of Or Echad and the Homeschool program. I'm here because I'm not the kind of rabbi who likes to preach to others and tell them what to do. I kind of just talk about things that I admit about myself and relate to, and hopefully they'll kind of be on board. So I know if I dig deep enough, I can find some imperfections in my own life and my own history that I could then relate with others. So I think it's an important thing for me to talk about and be open about.
I'm Adam Clickfeld. I'm at Temple Beth Am in the city, in the west side. What's the second half of the prompt?
Why are you here?
I want to study with you.
I'm Adam Greenwald, and I was supposed to introduce you, but I was late, or you were early, or one thing. So I'll just say the thing that I wanted to say about you, Zach, which is that I think that there's a system of how rabbis are judged in the broader population, and that has a lot to do with size of congregation and number of publications and who made it on that horrible list that's now gone, thank God. And then I think that there's a way that colleagues judge each other, and the way that colleagues judge each other is who do I want to learn from and who do I consider a genuine mensch. And I have thought of you as just really one of the great teachers and one of the great mention in Los Angeles for as long as I've been a rabbi, and I felt really, really honored that I got to have the opportunity to say that aloud to you in front of a group of people.
Thank you, Adam.
It's,
Let's close right now. What more do we need to? That's so kind. Thank you.
And in terms of being in a session about embracing, and as I understand it, what we're learning about embracing and exploring imperfections, I feel, as other people have said, to be a very imperfect guy, asked to stand up in front of people and talk about what's the right thing to do. And I don't really fucking know most of the time. So this is helpful to think about what it means to be an imperfect person helping to support other imperfect people.
You're still doing the conversions, right?
Yeah, I'm running the Intro to Judaism program at AG.
Is this yours or is this?
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Thanks.
I just picked it up outside, so.
Oh,
Hi, I'm Steve Einstein, and I am in Fountain Valley. And I actually am trying to look very closely because I want to understand about your eyebrow, and that is what will finally come out, I'm sure, in the lesson.
Ron usually asks me to shave it, but I didn't this morning.
Oh, okay.
That's part of the show and tell.
That's funny. That was very good. So, I mean,
Right.
first of all, I'm following my own advice, which I, for years, when people would tell me they were going to the Cage conference, and they say, you know, what should I take? And I say, ignore the topic. Go for the teacher. And that's what I really believe, and that's why I'm here. And the other thing is, I used to come to the seminar because I needed to get stuff to write the sermons. And I sort of this little congregation in Yuma, Arizona, so yeah, I said I do have to prepare sermons. But for me, I was thinking about it this morning. The real reason I come, first of all, is actually to reconnect with colleagues. That's the primary reason. And the other primary reason is it's part of my LO experience. Personal to hear and to feel and to let it enter. And I think that this topic, perhaps more than any of the others, is very personal.
I'm Wendy Spears. I'm in Woodland Hills. I don't serve a congregation. And this is part of my own learning for the year. There aren't that many opportunities as a non-congregational rabbi to learn our texts and from each other and to see everyone. And I only get a moment to view every week, so that's why I'm here.
Richard Camrus. I'm in West Hills, show called Shomer Torah. I was struck by your presentation. I don't know you, never had a chance to learn, but it was compelling. And given that I'm perfect, I want to know what it's like for people who suffer from imperfections to try to better understand where they're coming from.
That is true,
Unless,
by the way.
unless, of course, you speak with my wife, my children, my mother, my father, my
Colleagues.
congregants, my colleagues, pretty much everybody.
My name is Ben Goldstein. I'm at Temple Aliyah in Woodland Hills. I came here because some people are passionate about social justice. Some people are passionate about, I don't really love the phrase, what is your Torah? Because I don't think it's a little simplistic. But I grew up in a community and educationally with Musar my entire life. And I am well aware of my imperfections, and I have an ego enough to want to try to change them, but humble enough to know that they need to be changed. And for me, this is what I preach. Every high holidays, I'm not a big macro kind of speech guy. I'm more about what's going on with you, and let's talk about your soul and working better and being better in the coming years. So this was a great topic for that. So,
Thank you, everyone. Maybe can you lead us in the prayer for Torah study?
Okay. I usually hold hands. Thank you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו לעסוק בדברי תורה. Amen.
Mimi was one of my first teachers when I came to Los Angeles from University Synagogue when you were just beginning your rabbinical school process at the time. And you're also one of my predecessors at Temple Akita. So it's interesting. I don't know about you, when our Torah study groups offers the blessing, it's people commonly will say la'asot b'divrei Torah instead of la'asok, because they know the word la'asot more. It's a nice mistake, though, isn't it? Yeah. To, in addition to engaging or immersing ourselves in words of Torah, to la'asot, to do the words of Torah. So it's a mistake that while I internally sometimes will correct, at the same time, maybe la'asot is the way we should be saying it. Mm-hmm. So, la'asot v'la'asot b'divrei Torah. I want to begin with my own family story, and then go into some Mishnah study, and have that elicit our own stories, and then brainstorm a little bit. So last November, my husband Ron was in Charlotte, North Carolina for League of Cities, a political event. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, when the cat's away, the mouse will go out and play. So I went to Vegas for the day. And I had just gotten back on the plane when I got a text. And the text said, "Don't panic, I'm being taken by ambulance to the hospital." And as soon as I read that, the flight attendant came on and said, "The doors are closed, turn off your phones." So I couldn't call him. And don't panic, I'm being taken by ambulance. Of course I'm going to panic. I called my sister immediately, or I texted my sister, and I said, "Rachel, please call Ron so he hears a voice and so he knows what's going on." Got to Los Angeles. It turns out that Ron had been hit by a car. He was a pedestrian crossing the street. He had the right of way. It was dark. A car made a left-hand turn. He slammed right into him. He fractured his knee. And all these questions came up. Is he able to get from Charlotte back to Los Angeles? Will he have to have, he definitely had to have surgery, but where would it be? And we decided that if he had it there, he'd be stuck there for the next 6 weeks. And so that I had to fly back to Charlotte and bring him home. My gosh, it totally takes a village to get him from the hotel room to the airport, to the plane, etc. When I was on my way to Charlotte, Ron told me that he's on the 12th floor of this hotel after the hospital let him go, when the fire alarm went off.
Oh my God.
And it said, "This is not a drill. We need you to evacuate immediately. The elevators have been shut down." And Ron is beginning to panic. And it turns out it wasn't a drill, but it was a false alarm. But he was so scared. And this is a resilient, very strong man who is terrified because he realized that as strong as he is, he's not as strong as he thought he was. And that each and every person is weaker than we want to think we are. No problem. Now, I'm going to fast forward it because I want all of us to keep in mind these two phrases at the same time. We're weaker than we think we are, but we're also stronger than we think we are. And sometimes these moments of brokenness can unfold incredible deep strength that we had no clue that we could tap into. But that's sort of a fast forward. I'm bringing the two end pieces together. We got Ron home, and he was physically and emotionally broken. I mean, he became a guinea pig for the various drugs and painkillers. We had read, maybe you guys remember this, about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a situation in Beverly Hills where there's a woman outside of a clinic who had jumped from the 5-story roof and committed suicide. And this is a woman who was otherwise absolutely, quote unquote, normal, and no one really knew what happened. When Ron was on these painkillers, he said, I now get it. Because there was a time that he felt like taking a chair and throwing it through a window because he felt like he had to get more air to breathe. It makes you crazy, these kinds of painkillers that we can go on. We get Ron home and we begin the process of the next stage of our lives, which included surgeries and doctor's visits and hospitals and all different kinds of things, walkers and crutches and canes. And fast forward now to the end of almost a year of this process, Ron is preparing for a half marathon. And he never would have thought in a million years that he would train for something like this. But he has been so consistently working with his physical therapist that he's gone above and beyond where he began before the surgery and before the incident happened. But it really made me think, when we are forced to be al regel echad in every way, in physical ways, in intellectual ways, and in emotional ways, what do we do? Where do we go with it? How do we overcome it? And sometimes we can't. Ron was lucky enough that he got better, but we don't always get better. And sometimes our injuries are physical ones, but they're not always physical. The emotional scars that were unbound during this time. I asked him, I said, do you ever relive that moment when the car hit you? And he said, no, I don't think about that at all. But what it did unleash was the loss that he's had, that we've had in our lives, the loss of both of his parents, the loss of our little puppy. And all of a sudden, those losses became very profound because we felt so weak. We wanted our mommy to come and hug us. We wanted our little dog to come and just be with us. And so it just magnified all of that. So anyway, all these topics really got me thinking, and I am working on one of my high holiday topics entitled Al Regel Echad. When we have these injuries in our lives, how do we move forward? And so it presented some really incredible text, and that's what I want to dive into. I want to look at the text. I want to look at it in Chavruta, and then discuss how you respond to the text, and then share our own stories. How these imperfections have made it difficult for us, but what we can learn from them as well. So I made plenty of copies here. And these are texts from the Mishnah, and they're about what, who brought it up? Mimi, what Mimi brought up, about what the Torah and the Mishnah prohibits for the priests, prohibits in the kinds of priests to come forward. So this is from Bekorot, chapter 7, and I got it from the site Safaria. If you've never used Safaria, it's an incredible website. And when I went on it a couple of days ago to download these texts, there's a little thing on there saying, during the month of Elul is a good time to make donations to Safaria. So, they need our support, so it's a good time to do it. So I'm going to ask you to team up with 2 or 3 people and read through these Mishnayim. Perhaps something will stick out, perhaps something won't. You can read it in the original King James English. I mean, in the original Hebrew or in the English, whichever you prefer. You can do both. But take 10 or 15 minutes to read through these.
Start. Should you want to start?
Sure.
Hi, Steve.
All right, you want to
Sure,
work with me?
These blemishes, whether permanent or temporary, invalidate a person, i.e. a priest, from serving in the temple. The following are added to these regarding a person. One whose head is shaped like a pyramid, or radish, or a hammer, or one whose head protrudes in front, or if it does not protrude in the back. A hunchback will be able to validate and say just that.
Person, a priest, serving in the temple. Following are added to those regarding a person, one who is shaped like a pyramid, or one whose head protrudes in front, or if it does not proceed in the back. A hunchback
And the
will
difficulty
validate.
that people might have in looking at a person who is deformed, which again doesn't justify the exclusion, but at least from a
No, better
psychological
question.
perspective, I
How do
know.
we work around
These
this?
blemishes, whether permanent or temporary,
invalidate a
person, my first reaction is,
The following are added to these regarding a person. One whose head
look
is shaped
because
like
I'm
a
fascinated,
pyramid,
don't
or
look
radish,
because I
or a
can't
hammer,
want to. And then my next reaction is, oh, it's being natural because I don't want the person to think
A
that
hunchback
I'm
would be
ignoring
able
them
to
because they have a deformity.
You don't want to stare and you don't want to ignore it.
So, if you're
That's a different
first of all,
This is the difficult is what makes you a giver
their own emotions
possible.
and
And
mirroring.
I think, the compelling question here is the very idea of exclusion. What does it mean to have an intrinsic invalidation?
The other thing to work
You were describing
kind
a
of
circumstantial
contemporary.
invalidation, which came
How we look.
extrinsically. We're discussing an intrinsic.
Oh, the other way around. That was ambiguous.
Gains weight, lost weight, wears like whatever. It's fodder. It's
But there is something that will
public consumption.
render somebody invalid for performance. Function. Having a broken leg means you can't run a marathon. It's temporary. You obviously can run half marathon. But the very concept of
Fingernail polish, no fingernail polish, what we're wearing. And this is, but it's always.
invalidation renders a larger question.
I'm not going to pretend that I know what it's like to be human.
What
I'm also going to say that
kind of
when we gain weight or lose
quality
weight, when we're wearing something that looks good or doesn't look good, haircuts or lack of haircut or stumble, I mean,
that's
it's
what
all,
I'm driving from
yeah.
the beginning of
It's
the
considered
question is brilliant.
But it didn't used to be.
About the
It
categories.
used to be.
Nobody would think of the rabbis. They were just old artifacts that would talk.
So my
I think that's me now.
It reminds me.
Sorry, that it goes too close to home.
One who is bald is invalid.
So I'm
Who is
guessing
considered
there
bald,
is
anyone who does
some
not have.
over our wishes to next them. We could choose to sacrifice
categories
some
are all
others.
that
I'm still curious to know, and I feel
Okay, so
Also, if you only have
what would it
one,
actually mean to have a person who has
Give
a
that
shape,
why
or a human shape, or
Dosis is anyone who's
doesn't protrude straight away?
but Nina
I
back
would
with wine.
imagine that all the around cognitive
Seems like they.
If you have a pyramid-shaped head,
I'm kind of interested in how
What is this
us
as?
you
then,
have a head that does
only
not
have one
protrude
option
correctly,
I'd
you
want to
might
have
be
some more
Psychologically, there's the potential for
These are
bring something
things
lesser.
and
that
it's safe,
we
right?
would
It's
ordinarily
about
go.
It's all
It's
different.
puzzling normal.
It's
And scoliosis you don't necessarily see. I think falls is pretty
This is a
common,
police
not
element
considered to be a
for the,
hunchback.
for the.
And you know exactly the same as sometimes makes a shape, and it's not the same.
But a physical
Scott,
defect
you know, it's an organ that's not necessarily
would
seen as
invalidate.
That's
There was,
the way that the
and you could add a qualitative.
To have very obvious
quantitative use of
example.
this. And that's kind of prompting me. What was the qualitative baseline for an individual?
The Harum is in that. If both his eyes are higher than normal or lower than normal, or if one eye is higher than the other, or if one eye is up down, literally he sees
That's
or
what
one
you're
closes his eyes and just one does
If it is
mismatch.
not a
Or
vibrant,
one of his eyes comes
one,
to I have a URL that
So they did clarify that.
so,
It's funny, there's a bit of
What did I get at?
And they're gonna have a
I
very hard time
gotta
finding
smile
jobs.
because I have a whole
Sometimes for
eyebrow.
reasons that and sometimes for reasons that are not good. And I believe for about almost for like
One is
I might bring somebody on who may have the emotional capacity who's going to struggle for life because of a variety of physical or health problems. I have a woman right now,
it has fallen.
that
she had some
Lonnie on
issues with that.
Maybe it's the
And when
opposite.
they finally realized that, the
Maybe
doctor said,
it's
"No, once surgery
the
immediately, otherwise it will continue to fall, and she'll look like Picasso."
Good optics, isn't that
Most
what
people,
it is?
when they look at her, can tell, but now one
It's
eye is slightly, one is slightly lower than
Oh,
the
it's so much
next something inside of the structure that collapsed.
right.
So this is really speaking
So when I read this,
Very
it spoke to me, and I said to myself, and I'm reading it, you know, but she's no different
And
than
so is
me,
that my
just
limitation
because
for looking at
she has that physical perfection.
That's a failure.
So why then
Or
be
someday she actually
excluded?
does all
Then
right.
at the end of it, it's so interesting that they bring up this concept
Well, we'll
of
give her a shot.
lying,
The rest of her life,
you know, as a response.
underemployed.
No, I think it's,
That
I would think it's this is a basic management,
Like you were saying,
there's a
maintain,
perhaps it had a truer version of public, something which was, I had that experience.
where there cannot
Which
be
I was organic school system in my dead wife.
goodness,
Right,
you know, rabbi, you know,
Or,
working as a
Michael Mackenzie found this
demand.
and I actually passed out.
Which is an impossibility in order to achieve.
Pulse.
So it's like those jokes or comments people make to us. Come on, you can,
Such children in cages.
you have a direct line, you're closer to God than I am, or you know, whatever. I mean, for them, the Kohanim really were. Right, they were the media, they were
And this goes back to the story
with,
of,
you know, without them, nothing could happen.
Hunchback is different,
They were God's representatives.
discussion about, is everybody, says, everybody feels as of the story.
Their eyelashes fall out, they're constantly blinking and
The
their
hunchback
because they
refuses to accept his apology.
The eyelashes, you know, prevent stuff from
I can't remember where
happening.
that is.
So when
One
you
of
have
the
like
things I used that for
yeah,
child
it's
care.
really
I think that there's truly an openness to, that there are some things that are truly
it's
important.
probably related to
And
the
if they
right before
undermine
it
perhaps they
happens.
it's functional. But I think the deeper piece to Russia here is that we're really concerned about
They're,
how we
the
own.
sentence right before, if their eyes are constantly tearing, that's what happens when you don't have eyelashes and eyebrows.
That's why I read it as I did, because the question is, am I invalid? And that's where I know we could take this further. But I read this basically as a management.
If his eyes were as big as those of a cat or as small as those of a goose, if his body is larger than him, i.e. larger in relation to the size of his limbs are smaller than his, or if his nose is bigger than
As you said,
his,
the
or if it's
aesthetic
smaller,
of the
it seems to
institution,
them
the aesthetic of the institution is
who
not
is the
significant.
who is it
So
going to
it's not which I tried to look for, right?
like a sponge.
Who is
we think about people, this is their history. And
So,
they
so we're
born
talking about
We're
the
sort of
underlying,
talking
the
about
underlying
it
what
makes
they've
it
been. Is
more difficult.
the margins.
Oh my gosh, I love it. We live in my family.
You can stand for
No, I'm serious.
You look
They
at
would
minutia.
be-
Or is there
I mean,
some,
the last
somebody
section is
somebody
Yes.
cognitive
Perfect
can't.
example.
If that's the case, think about why is it that the Cohen
In our
needs
world
to
today, in the
disagree
Or even
perhaps
somebody
better
goes,
social
What does that do?
All
of the
they
people
were on the lower
who
level.
are looking at
And what I get,
and judging themselves against his If the Cohen has to be this perfect specimen, what does that say to everybody else?
Like, is not.
If you become a rabbi,
I think that
unrelatable.
Isaiah was a concept that there was aesthetic book of Mormon.
But I think that's true. I think that there, when you look at people who are really beautiful, like they have sort of this light shining, or when you see in magazines, and then people are all airbrushed, and they, and but I think it makes you feel
My major
separate.
hospitalizations.
That you feel separate, that you don't, that it's hard to feel close to the perfect person.
We're deeply cognizant that we need to repair. We have to come back to that position of being cashier in some way.
Very different
That's one reason why we have far more mikvah
from your
ceremonies than we
experience
have
of the
here. Because we need to have some kind of ritual
then
process
why
to be able to
does
affirm that we're back into wholeness. This is saying that there are people who are
Yes, it's unrelatable, it's not what we are, but it's
not
also
correctly
aspirational.
or
Right?
presented
I think of the fact that
invalidated.
other traditions, there are perfect
Because today, but I think that
Jesus,
we're looking through
Buddha,
that
right?
lens.
There are,
In ways for us, biggest perfection is
and to be able to see that as a
I'm
role
not this whole
model,
thing with President
not
Trump,
necessarily
one latent
one to which I have to live up to,
racism that we're gonna all admit to.
but something that A, aspire to and B,
Homophobia that
comfort.
you think of watching people on the left,
Right?
anti-Semitism,
If we've got our shit together,
yeah, exactly.
It's easy for
And
people
it's
to come
there
to
and
us.
maybe
If we're a mess,
allow the surface
and we
to
walk in
scratch.
slovenly, and we just look totally unkempt and disorganized and unprepared, it's going to be very hard for people to say, I want to come to him or her and see their feet or be comforted in a time of crisis or anything, because they just are so not put together.
I think the first point that you made is really applies to this as well. That the idea of wanting to look not that tension,
In other words, because it takes you away from what you're supposed to be concentrating on. If the person is not a perfect specimen, then I spend all of my time focused on the imperfection as opposed to on the the ritual.
That's a good point.
I mean, I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, yeah, if the person is, and then I also pay attention to that. Right? You know, we get Sports Illustrated, my son, who is 18 years old, I say,
Even the Egyptians did like
do you want the Sports
I think that God's not doing that.
Swimsuit? Yeah, Dad.
I think that this is
That issue.
issue.
Then he expects that that's the image of the woman that he has to find in the world who is airbrushed and perfect, and it becomes unrealistic.
But one day he can't continue.
yeah, and there was just a thing in the paper about 25% of people on dating sites want they will contact someone who looks better than they initial aspirations that they themselves think they are, that they aspire to somebody who looks better than they do. Yeah.
You know, but the flip side is, we might not like it, every single one of
funny you
us
should say that.
discriminates based on them. It is subconscious, it is proven that good-looking people get better jobs, they're listened to more authority, and a man who's tall also, right? The other thing is with two careers, right? So I was an actor for years. The people that look can't get roles. They end up playing the model of the actor in whatever they're doing. It's the people that have, like, if you look at Tom Cruise or any of the big movie stars, they all have little imperfections that make them more relatable. They're not the same. They are not the same. Like Tom Cruise's nose is not whatever. Because they're not the same as like runway models or print models. They're very different looks.
I know how we felt.
But most movies that you see, like you're talking about, are symmetrical. Most of those people are symmetrical.
Yeah, we gravitate towards symmetry.
Yeah.
We have a
So the question is, am I reading this wrong? Are texts asking or are they just?
I'm gonna say, is 5 more minutes enough?
Sure.
Yes, sure.
Okay.
Just give us an obvious imperfection.
Want to jump through
really problematic. Not problematic, but really noticeable.
Who notices? So it's my turn, right?
Yeah.
If his navel.
But you would still be a war.
If you have the left ear comes over him, if his testicles are usually large, his navel are very large.
In other words,
If it's not, well, you can and you can't. It's like if a number is intrudes to the point where it becomes a distraction to the person who, or the people who are trying to focus on what they would claim is something that's kedusha, or getting the sexuality in the way, and that's problematic.
It's not really more important to look at one of the talks about
But I think it goes about, what you were saying earlier,
It feels like it's about distraction.
women rabbis,
Right.
said
Somebody
it's
who's so strange
every single
that their
thing is
look
noticed.
distracts
What they wear, like how they put on their makeup.
In reference to
the point where you cannot in any way be
authentically having an imperfection
doesn't be judged just on your sexuality.
in terms of our physicality or in
Bring
terms
back the
of
pulpit.
our emotional and moral,
What?
Bring back the
our emotional proportion, our abilities
And you don't have to worry about it.
to encounter and
You don't see any breasts or testicles.
resilient or
For my first 7 years, I wore
bearing restraint
I wore a robe
or
every shot. Actually, in the
reactive,
last year,
whatever it may be,
I
that is our behavioral and moral imperfection.
I wear a pulpit robe when I work for congregation.
That's something which we can work on in terms of our own measurement. But
One
being
is
authentic and
ankles
flawed in
or
terms of
knees
a professional piece,
or
that's our insecurity because we know that we don't know Torah as well as the next one, or that we can't stick like this one.
Is about the bunion.
But there's sometimes things that are intrinsic, and that's what
Because
we can't change gears or stem or whatever it may be.
His fingers and toes lie on top of each
And so we have to then,
other. Or they're
I
wet.
think, at some point, accept that these things are what they are. And I have to live with my own impatience, I have to live with my own irritability, and those things may render me imperfect, but physically, on display all the time. Whereas these people being bald and funky eyes,
want to say that's
So I don't know.
really
You can't
not-
escape it.
Well, they
It's
can
not
bless
a
you,
job.
but the stage goes out.
Sneezes.
A dark skinned person or red skinned or albino or a
Imagine.
Boston or
Understand
a
the
or a Chotan, the one who's strong.
As we mature and grow, those elements of our behavioral and moral aspects just like drugs, we're willing to.
They're also brilliant.
And
And
insane
that's,
animal
I
is
think,
not
part of the
individual.
psychology
My
aspect.
little rabbis are
We-
poking
again,
at
it's
us.
like the knowledge of sins or scarlet
This
letter.
is valid in a person, but no, it's possible.
But we can't change this. So this is
So what do we
perfect.
do now? So what do we do now? I'm kind of a practical
You may
one.
not like it.
Really not, but I am really too.
Well,
Very not
I mean,
minded.
there are
Oh,
studies right about
It's interesting
teachers in
for
school
me to
giving
see this
their kids do better.
about skin color. Because so my perception of politics is that that's one of the things that we don't go through.
Very particular looking student.
And yet,
I might be more.
But then right now.
I would have more and then there's somebody who's particularly looking at.
So folks, let's focus again. We know it's wrong. Finish up your thought. It's wrong, and yet there's something that we're, I don't explain we're like strong.
Yes.
It parallels, you know, the Torah, there's so many laws with animals not having blemishes. So just as the animals should, we should help them. And it makes a lot of sense for the animals because you don't want to sacrifice the worst of them. You know, Cain and Abel.
One of our choir members told me last year, she said, when Jews study, we tend to argue, but when we sing, those different voices turn into harmony.
That's true.
And it was a really neat,
Nice.
a neat piece of Torah I learned from her. So, I don't know about you, but these texts kind of piss me off sometimes.
Yes.
Talk to me. What Torah did it bring out? What questions? What thoughts?
Well, you know, I have to laugh because I think like here with Beverly Hills, with the right plastic surgery, like, reconstructive, you can get past all of these.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are very much in that process throughout their whole lives around here, so it seems very superficial in a way.
Well, but let's talk about that. I mean, yeah, we can get plastic surgery to get beyond
To
a
make
lot
sure
of
that
this
we don't have
stuff.
one eye a little open than
You
the
know?
other, and the reconstruction of the limbs so that they all sit straight. And
I've been going through eugenics for the past 2 years to get rid of my bald spots, and I don't know if it's doing anything.
well, we have to measure if it's behind the ear,
Right,
otherwise you're
right.
still good.
So let's say we repair these things. Does that make us fit?
We confronted some of the challenge of the text and the original psukim from the Torah that the rabbis are trying to understand. And the conversation turned into also an attempt to understand the wisdom from the text, right? Because even in our society, where hopefully we don't see a physical deformity as representative of an emotional or psychological or mental deformity, is there something that we're supposed to learn about the power of good aesthetics in ritual? Right? Are there places in our tradition, even 2018, in the halachic or meta-halachic or non-halachic world, where because of something that someone did not opt into, they just may not be able to join a particular group or subgroup, right? So we talked about, is it possible that we jumped into Brit Milah. Is it possible that someone who cannot undergo Brit Milah because of hemophilia or something like that cannot convert? Is there a place for the tradition to actually say, sadly, maybe even cruelly, but straightforwardly, there are certain aspects of our bodies that do indeed keep us from certain inclusions? Or are we in an era where we say no to all of that? And we kind of hung out in the Rabbi Yehuda Chachamim Machloket in the first Mishnah, trying to understand whether or not they were arguing over whether or not a hunchback does or does not represent any kind of mental deformity that would actually make it proper for them not to serve. That's where we hung out.
We also talked similarly, we talked about, the role of a leader vis-a-vis his or her people and the difficulty that people have. The tension that we all have when we see it, somebody with, some kind of, deformed physical aspect of their being. We look and then we don't want to look. And we then want to look because we don't want to have that person see us as ignoring them. And the tension that we feel back and forth, and then the tension that they feel because of it, or maybe they're immune to it. And the question is, as people who are leading communities, what can't be and what shouldn't be a distraction for the people who we are serving? If so much of our physical being becomes a distraction to them, either for good or for bad, then we cannot be the kind of symbolic exemplar that the rabbis need us to be, the vassal to God that the Kohen was seen as, and it just becomes a focus on the physical as opposed to on that which is much more important.
I have actually no problem with these Mishnayot. I don't. I think it's unbelievably honest about the way we look at things. I think we all want to think we're less superficial than we are, and I think this Mishnah kind of, you want to talk about imperfections, right? I think this Mishnah kind of demands our attention. We can wag our finger at it and say it's not right that all these kind of seemingly nitpicky kind of things, and then the question is, do we do the same thing?
And I raised an issue comparable that but this is our look outward. Is there a fear that we may have some elements of these blemishes of our own, and is it safe to look out and not look inwards? And Zach raised that. Okay, he just indicated more that people will become bald because those who some will, and so that this may capture us at one time, but not another time. We have to realize that that we have to face our own imperfections that are physical and intrinsic. But what about our imperfections, which are behavioral, moral, and that we have, if we have the will and perhaps the capacity, that we can address, and that are not physically obvious, like that we can't ignore our eyes and baldness, whatever, but our behavioral pieces, those we can cover or we can address.
But something we didn't talk about, which as you're talking, it makes me think about when there are these physical imperfections, there's also stuff going on inside.
Bingo.
When you don't measure up,
Right.
when you think you don't measure up, or you're judging yourself against everyone else, that you feel less than, and then how could you serve adequately if you feel totally less than?
Beautiful.
Perfect.
And then it becomes then the text become actually a critique of the society, which would have people with physical deformities feeling less rather than a critique of them. Create a society where those people don't feel less and they can serve. It's probably not pshat, but it's a nice way of reading it.
That's right.
So I was going to say exactly what you were saying. Because what happens is, what is the goal here? The goal here is which Kohen is eligible to bring my sacrifice before God, right? So if a Kohen comes and says, well, he's got all these issues, what is the psychological impact? Even if they go afterwards to even if they go to a plastic surgeon and fix everything, the residues in the heart and in the neshama of the imperfection they have before is constantly here. Just because the outside is fixed, it doesn't mean I'm not keenly aware of what is my imperfection, even if it's something simple as baldness. Simple, right? So what happens to my neshama? Am I constantly aware of my imperfection, and therefore I cannot really bring in an open heart, in a clean heart, right, as a shaliach tzibur, before God, the sacrifice that I totally have to be in the space of kavanah, totally have to be in the space of kavanah in order to serve the person who gives me his sacrifice, let's say of thanksgiving, or wrongdoing, or a sin, right? I totally have to be in the space. A, if I am distracted because of the residues in my own neshama. B, if the person who is giving me the sacrifice is distracted because of my somewhat imperfection, and he's focusing on that with me. So there are two sides to that coin. Yeah.
Well, it seems though that it's more about Marit Ayin. That's mentioned several times throughout. So it's so other people are not talking gossip, lashon hara or chilut about you.
But it's all distractions.
I'm mesmerized. I'm sure that some others have in your sanctuary is the Dalif Nemiat Haomed
Right.
above the ark or on the ark somewhere. That often moves me to tears because, gosh, standing before ourselves and our own imperfections is scary. And the phrase, Mimi, that you used, the spiritual residue, the spiritual residue of things when we're trying to perfect ourselves aesthetically, or that continue to be inside of our hearts, that's a tough sentence. That's a tough paradigm. It's tough to stand in front of sometimes.
It's scarier to stand without knowing, though. And with these, they're all open. And that's both the blessing and the curse, because you can't avoid, as Richard said, being seen and turning away. But the stuff that that's not obvious, that's not present, the stuff that's hidden, that we're outwardly with our congregation. Look at what happened in Pennsylvania with all these 300 priests. Outwardly, they're functioning, blah-de-da, but privately, they're functioning in a whole different way.
Right.
I'm really touched by Mimi's read, Mimi, right? That the challenge to, on some level, be honest and share as a leader your reality, your imperfections. I think we live in an era, hopefully, where we as rabbis and as practitioners are not so closed in that we cannot cry at a funeral or share our pain. But at the same time, to not make our deformities, physical and emotional, so present in our work, that they distract from our obligation to serve.
That's right.
And I'm thinking about that very personally right now, because I'm in some ways echoing very similar to Ron's situation, having a very hard time recovering from what was a bad bicycle accident and what seemed like a simple orthopedic situation. It's kind of gotten out of control. And it's been my utter reality for 10 weeks, and how can it not show up on some level on Rosh Hashanah? The community knows about it. It can't not, right? It's like if I showed up with a third arm and I didn't mention it. But your Torah is a reminder that it also can't be so overwhelmingly present as a topic that it distracts from being able to serve their needs, right? So it's harnessing your deformity to help bring others forward. So
Excellent.
Thank you.
I have a completely different idea that's entering my head, and I don't want to go off topic. I'm thinking of the Kohanim. Other people could decide what they wanted to do for a living. But if you were born into this particular family, you were to be a Kohen. That was your role in the world. But if you had the wrong eyebrow, then what do you do with your life? if you were exempt from service, but they weren't landowners, they weren't farmers, did they just have to kind of live off their brother Kohanim and not be productive human beings for their whole life? I never thought of that until now.
Maybe the Gemara goes into that, I don't know.
We talked about it.
Yeah, as a Kohen, or at least my father was a Kohen, I can tell you that. There's still other service. There's, the Tazria Matzara, where you're inspecting people or homes and other service.
Okay, so
can do other
you
than-
just can't offer
You're not like a
sacrifice.
pulpit priest, so
Okay,
to speak.
okay, got
But
it.
there's still other kind of
Pastoral care.
priest, exactly, or a chaplain priest.
Oh, okay.
No, go ahead.
I think that what you say, Steve, just sort of brings me back to what I've been thinking through this whole thing, which is there's just a lot about bodies which is really unfair, right? They just a lot of times don't do the things that they really ought to do, and sometimes that looks like what should be an easy healing procedure just isn't, and sometimes it looks like the people who just can't seem to catch a break and go from one illness to the next illness to the next illness. And sometimes that looks like a woman's body that just can't seem to carry a baby. And that looks like all sorts of times when bodies just don't do the things that they're supposed to do. And we can give spiritual antidotes to those sorts of things and talk about creating a society in which we don't worry about those sort of things, but there just needs to also be a statement of bodies are unfair a lot of the time, and that's not okay, but it just is. And so this poor shmoo who's born a Cohen and his body just won't do the things that a Cohen's body needs to do, on one hand I want to find a solution for him, on the other hand I want to say he ain't the only one.
Did anyone else see the Mr. Rogers movie?
Right.
Oh my gosh, my hero.
It's a brilliant movie, and there's a vignette in there with a little boy named Jeffrey who his whole life was relegated to a wheelchair. I actually knew him because he and I were campers together. By every stretch of what this is teaching us, Jeffrey would be pasul. I think we'd all be willing to say that he brings me closer to God than almost anything else. And sometimes these things that are quote unquote imperfect are reminders of holiness in every way. Now I want to use that to transition, so I'm going to brainstorm with you for a minute. We talk about how these things that the Talmud or the Mishnah doesn't allow. Where in Judaism is the concept of brokenness part of our ritual and part of our holiness? Just shout things out and bring them up. What's that? Wedding. So breaking glass.
We come alive.
For broken pens. All right.
The afikomen.
So, okay. Breaking glass. The afikomen.
Brit milah.
Brit milah, certainly breaking skin. Okay.
Breaking bread.
Breaking bread. What else?
Tearing the Kriya ribbon.
Kriya.
So it's not breaking, but it's leaving something undone or broken a little bit. Somebody can say better than I, but something about when you build a house in Israel,
The east
right?
wall.
That
Yeah.
leaving something
Creating
unfinished.
unfinished.
Yeah.
Zecher l'mikdash.
Mm-hmm. How about
The
the
schach.
schach?
Schach is-
The sukkah? Good.
Hoshana Rabbah.
How about
Oh yeah, Hoshana, the beating of the willows.
Shivarim or Teruah?
Yeah.
Maybe even the whole concept of kol nidre, broken vows. Vows
To
that
make,
we
break the water, surface of water.
break on the surface of the water. How do all of these examples, which are so part of Jewish ritual, why does breaking something make us whole?
Do you ever read that story and then the sermon by Harold Kushner many, many years ago about the, it's the Shel Silverstein book, the circle.
Broken piece.
The broken piece, the
The
missing
missing piece,
piece.
yeah.
Yes, and then So in the book, this piece is, rolling along looking for its missing piece, and it can't find its missing piece. And then finally, it finds its missing piece, and once it's whole, it rolls so fast that it misses all of life. It misses all the enjoyment that it had. And Kushner, many, many years ago, I think when his son died, wrote the most profound sermon about you cannot have a heart unless a whole heart unless it's a broken heart.
Right. That's beautifully said.
That's part of Kavot, yes.
There's also a story about a rabbi or something. I'm going to butcher this. I don't. It's about a rabbi who said he has the most beautiful heart in the world, and somebody talks about their heart, and it comes out that his heart is there are chunks of it missing. There are because of the relationships he's had and people that are no longer in his life, but because of the impact that they've had on him, that missing piece, as you will, makes his heart beautiful. Right. Sorry, I don't know where the story comes from.
It's a beautiful story. I know which one you're talking about also. It's a beautiful story.
And of course, who is a tzaddik, the one who is, whose heart was broken, the one who knows what it is to be at the bottom, right? The one who has experienced brokenness and came back, like the whole idea of the Shuvah. That is the real tzaddik, not the one who sits and studies all day.
Right.
You have to understand brokenness. We appreciate the other person more for their imperfections than their perfections. So when I see a Major League Baseball player, not a Dodger, but a real Major League Baseball player.
A Red Sox player.
Perhaps. And I like that in Major League Baseball, to succeed means you succeed 3 times out of 10, means you fail 7 times out of 10. And there's
not
that.
really, because you get like 10 pitches per stand.
Well,
no.
I'm thinking of that being a whole equation. Right. So the idea being is that because I'm imperfect, it works for me seeing somebody else imperfect. When I've discovered in a congregation, if I call the wrong page out or begin the prayer wrong, once they're through laughing at me, they value it in their own weird way. Mm-hmm. And I think there's some of that we like to see.
That's really true. You're absolutely right, and it's really humbling. It happens to me all the time, people. I have this one congregant who sits Bema right, and his job in his mind is to find everything I do wrong. It's not that, I'm used to it, and to direct me to the right page before I can tell everyone. And it is a little annoying. On the other hand, a good hunk of the time, I'm wondering where do I need to be, and he says, we're on page 63 now. 63, everyone, and it's just, it's just kind of a weird sort of, I'm just one of you.
It depends what the imperfection is, though.
Yeah, pages aren't that big of a deal, you're right.
But I think, when there's someone who has a huge moral imperfection that the community agrees is imperfect. Somebody who has, embezzled money from the synagogue. So whatever it is, I think it's hard to come back from that. So there are certain things in these Mishnayot that are so distracting, you can't come back from them. That it's hard to find the moment of holiness.
Remember also that the Kabbalistic view that the world was created with the shattering vessels.
Good point. Yeah.
It's another one of these brokennesses often necessary for the world to begin, for creation to unfold. So I want to share one reading and then one story. The reading may not be as familiar, but the story probably more familiar. The reading is from Menachem Azaria Fano. He's a medieval author. And he simply writes, just as a seed cannot grow to perfection as long as it maintains its original form, growth coming only from decomposition, so too can the world not become perfect as long as we are in our original form. It's only by breaking out of
The shell.
So that's really important for growth, for any kind of growth.
It's a beautiful text. Can you share that?
Yeah, yes, I will share it. Best way to do that. I'll have it available on, through the Board of Rabbis site.
Mhm.
Okay.
But, it also makes me think of your book. That there was a lot of brokenness in the world,
Mm.
and then it had to be washed away.
Thank you for the advertisement.
Also, it occurs to me just, a woman giving birth, breaking water.
Right.
Without that pain and suffering, you don't give birth to new life.
Right. It's all got to break down. The other is a midrash based on text of the Ten Commandments. Remember, Moses breaks the Ten Commandments, the Aseret Debrot, goes up and gets a second set, but keep in mind that both the intact set as well as the broken set are placed piece by piece, holy vessel by holy vessel into the ark.
That's the promotion for my book. My second book is called Broken Fragments, and it's about
Beautiful.
that
So,
process.
thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
It's an extraordinary lesson to remember that transported across the God-forsaken desert are not only those who are whole, but those who are broken. And those who are broken are not relegated to being on another side of the Mechitza or wherever. They are side by side, right there. There's a great children's story by Mark Gilman in his book, God's Mailbox, which has a children's story version of this midrash. And about Moses' growth when learning how to slow down and realize that that the elderly and the infirm and the sick among us are just as holy as everyone else. 5 minutes, okay. And I think for us as leaders of the service, whether looking out to our congregation, but more importantly, looking inward to ourselves, those broken, fragile pieces are pure and are good if we listen, if we give them a voice, if we listen to them. So, anyway, it's an important story to keep in mind when we enter the Holy Period. Any additional thoughts or comments or concerns that come out of this kind of study?
Well, while everyone's thinking of more profound things, I just wanted to share. I sometimes purposely forget little things to engage the community. Like if I have a reference, I'm like, what was the name of that movie again? Wait about my mind. I'm pretty sure I know it, but it gives others a chance to kind of say, oh, you're talking about that. I'm going, yeah. For those who've seen it, so it kind of, I almost purposely show my imperfections at times.
Yeah, that's an
This way, in the back of their heads, when I really make mistakes, they probably think, oh, he's just trying to engage.
Yeah, that's them in that way. Well, I'll say this. I offer you my blessings for the Holy Day period. At this time, it's often kind of overwhelming, but I hope that everyone can find the rhythm as the Holy Days enter our hearts, and that we realize we're not alone. We're not alone with each other, with our communities, but that we've got these people surrounding us and these texts to go to help us remember that we're part of a conversation and a dialogue that's really deep inside of us.
Mishkach.
Yeah, thanks everyone for